Today on Diabetes Connections Type 2, talking with one of the lawyers bringing a class action lawsuit against the insulin companies, a lawsuit that has been inching forward since 2017. It was set to be settled for $500 million and a 4-year price cap, but the judge said no. Attorney Steven Berman will talk about that last-minute surprise, why he's still going forward, and what he needs now from the diabetes community. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to Diabetes Connections Type 2. I am your host, Stacey Sims, and I started this show late last year because after doing a podcast aimed at the Type 1 community for a very long time, since 2015, I was hearing from more and more people with Type 2 who wanted more information about issues that really affected the Type 2 community. I'm trying to hit that mark every week and bring you stories and news items and interviews about technology and subjects that are specific to the Type 2 community. But I gotta be honest with you, and if you've listened to my other podcast, you already know this. There are so many issues that overlap with Type 1 and Type 2 that I think it is really important sometimes to stand as one community. And this is one of them. And yeah, it's a soapbox issue, but it is so important when it comes to the price of insulin, when it comes to access and affordability to supplies. There really can be no separation between the communities within diabetes. And as you listen, I think that applies to you even if you do not use insulin. If you don't, I hope you listen to this interview anyway. Maybe you know somebody that has been affected by this. You never know what's going to happen down the road to your own personal situation. Maybe you will wind up needing to use insulin. And these lawsuits really seem to be the only way, unfortunately, to get the attention from the drug companies. So first, a little background. This is a class action lawsuit brought against Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, and Sanofi, claiming that the companies inflated the cost of insulin, setting artificially high list prices, while paying rebates to the pharmacy benefit managers in exchange for their covering the drug on behalf of health plans. There was an initial settlement announced in this, and if you've been following this closely, you may remember that some state attorneys general wanted that settlement to have a carve-out so they could continue with their own individual lawsuits. Lilly has settled with Minnesota. I'm not going to go through every single detail in every single state here, but suffice to say, and I do hate to say this, but it is complicated. So my guest is Attorney Steven Berman from the firm Hagens Berman. Steve co-founded Hagens Berman in 1993 after his prior firm refused to take a fast food E. coli case. And that turned out to be the very famous case against Jack in the Box, which resulted in a class action settlement, and it changed many, many food safety laws. He's also been involved in cases against big tobacco and, as you'll hear, other medical pricing lawsuits. Steven does a great job of laying out the case and laying out what he needs. They are looking for input from the diabetes community, especially if you bought insulin after 2019, either with coinsurance or at full price. I am putting a link in the show notes. It will also be all over my social media so that if this is you, or even if you think it's you, you can fill it out and the attorneys can look at it. My chat with Attorney Steven Berman right after this. Let's be honest, managing diabetes takes time, but ordering supplies should be simple. That's why I'm so excited to partner with US Med for this podcast. US Med stands out with their unwavering dedication to your health and well-being. They proudly hold the #1 spot as the distributor for Freestyle Libre systems nationwide, ensuring you have access to cutting-edge diabetes management. I love that they always provide 90 days worth of supplies and fast free shipping. And they accept Medicare nationwide and collaborate with over 800 private insurers. US Med is your trusted partner in diabetes care. Visit usmed.com/Stacey. That's usmed.com/STACEY. Steve, thanks for joining me. Welcome to Diabetes Connections.
Thanks for having me.
If you wouldn't mind, I'm going to ask you to kind of take us through this lawsuit in more detail. I mean, start at the beginning. What, I think as we all know in the diabetes community, why this was needed, right? We live it. But what prompted the suit back in 2017?
I got a call from someone who went on to start their own diabetes foundation, but they were paying for diabetes drugs. They thought there was something unfair in the pricing. So then I looked into it. We've done a lot of unfair drug pricing cases in my history. And so we're very familiar with how drugs are priced and how an industry mechanism called the average wholesale price, which is a fictitious price that the manufacturers put out there, can cause harm to certain kinds of people buying drugs. So when I looked at the average wholesale price, I did some research. I realized that people who are making co-payments or don't have insurance are paying this ridiculously high price, and it's not right. So that's how it got started.
I don't want to get too far in the weeds before we even get started, but these other lawsuits, these other medications, were those lawsuits successful? Because I think sometimes we feel like nothing's ever going to change.
Oh, they were hugely successful. So I brought a case against many manufacturers. This was like 15 years ago when these were oral cancer drugs. And the way the drug companies marketed to doctors was they would say, if you use our drug, we'll set the average wholesale price at $100, but your purchase price is $20 and you pocket the $80. So there was actually competition by the drug companies to market the phoniest price possible. And meanwhile, people with cancer, serious issues, are overpaying. And, some people, like in insulin, couldn't afford to pay for the drug. We actually went to trial. I won the trial. The judge ordered treble damages. And then eventually all the other manufacturers settled up. So yes, we had been successful, which was one reason why I thought we would be successful here.
I often will ask my Facebook group or ask my listeners what they want to know. When I asked my listeners about this interview, telling them it was coming, anything you want me to ask, everybody said, why is it taking so long? I hate to almost start out with that kind of question, but can you take us through or explain why it really is so complicated? Or maybe it's not, and they've just been successful in holding things up.
It's not that complicated. I think the judge had some personal health issues for a couple of years, like literally.
Wow.
And so it really went quiet. And I remember one session where he had been sitting on the motions to dismiss the case for like a year or more. And then he saw either was 60 Minutes or some other like documentary about the very problem. And he's like, oh, it kind of reminded me I hadn't done anything. And so he decided they needed to jumpstart the case. But even then, he really has taken a long time.
Wow. It's amazing as we sit outside the legal system, most of us, I don't think we realize those things can happen.
This is one of my older, slowest moving cases.
All right. Okay. Not just us. So take us through a little bit of it, but you can. In other words, what are you saying these companies are doing?
In a normal competitive market, drug companies would compete with each other. So all these drugs are the same. No drug is better than the other drug. And they're older drugs. They've been developed a long time ago. So it's not like this is some big innovation. Because the drugs are the same, normally you would compete on price. So you would tell the insurance companies or whoever's buying the drug, my drug is the same as your drug, but it's cheaper. But we have a very perverse healthcare system in the United States. And we have middlemen called pharmacy benefit manufacturers who go out and buy the drugs and then decide what drugs will be on a formulary at various insurance companies. So they want a piece of the action. And so the drug companies would market to the PBMs, I'll call them the PBMs, a high average wholesale price. And that's what would be charged to the patients. But the actual price the PBMs pay is low. So there's a gap. And so they competed by basically marketing the highest gap so that the PBMs could put money in their pockets. And that's the way they competed. So the impact of that competition, the opposite of real price competition, is to increase the out-of-pocket payments for people who pay at the pharmacy if they're uninsured or have a copay. And so we say that's an unfair and unconscionable practice as a matter of law, or it's deceptive because you're putting out a phony price. And if people knew the truth, they wouldn't pay that phony price.
It's so interesting because, with diabetes, and it's like the cancer patients you said, it doesn't matter if we know the truth. You can't not buy this product.
Well, that's why we brought what was called an unconscionability claim. And unconscionability is a common law doctrine that says if you're taking advantage of someone who can't get away from the product, like here, you have no choice, and you price gouge them, that is illegal. And the judge upheld that we had stated a claim. Yes, if this is what's happening, it's illegal. What we were trying to do was bring this as a class action on behalf of everyone who paid either an uninsured person or copay for these drugs from 2016 until today. And we wanted an injunction requiring fair prices to be set. And we wanted damages to all these people, like $1 billion against Novo, $1 billion against Sanofi, 800 million against Eli Lilly. And the idea was to send the money back to all these people who'd been ripped off. So the judge has to approve it as a class, and he did not do so. He said, I need to look at every single patient to decide if they could have avoided this costing imposition. Maybe they could have had a different insurance plan. Maybe they could take another drug. Not true. Different insurance plan. Not true. Your employer sets your insurance plan. You don't go in and say, hey, boss, my drug is too high. Pick another company. It's just not the way it works. And we put all that evidence in through experts. Judge says, no. I'm not going to agree that this should be a class. Do it over. Do it again. This time, bring a deception claim. And so everyone's speculating, why would he say that? Is he just toying with us? Or does he see a path to granting class approval if we change our claims a little bit? So that's what we've done recently. We filed a new complaint alleging racketeering and consumer deception.
Wow. So not to put too fine a point on it, but the lawsuit that we all remember from 2017, it's not over, but that path is done.
It's done until we can appeal.
Got it.
Right. And we can't appeal now because the case is still live. And we think the judge was wrong on class certification. In fact, we were literally shocked. It was one of the most shocking decisions I've ever had in my career. At the end of the argument, I said to the judge, this is what class actions are all about. This was the paradigm of why you would have a class action. Not one of these patients, no one in America thinks that these people weren't ripped off. President Biden, even President Trump, right? They've all complained about this. No one could afford to take these companies on by themselves. That's what class actions are for. He turned to the defendants. He said, seems like they're right about that. And they couldn't answer why it wasn't right. And so I go, okay, I got this. And then bam, we get this decision.
I'm asking this because I'm not afraid of asking dumb questions. When you're talking about a class action lawsuit for insulin, does it automatically include everyone, as you said, in the US who uses insulin, or did somebody have to sign up somewhere?
No. So what would happen is we would send out a notice to everyone. You're in this class. You don't need to do anything. If we win, we'll send you money. And we actually were engaged in a extremely complex, costly process where we could go find every single person. There's a clearinghouse that collects all this information, and they agreed to allow us to run it through their computers. And so we would have known how much you paid, how much your deductible was. We could attract every patient in America.
Talk to me about the racketeering. I seem to recall a RICO case that was thrown out with the insulin makers.
It was thrown out, but so here's what the judge did. And I think he's wrong. And if he knows, I'm just going to say it like it is. And if he hears this, the hell with it, okay? He said that only the most direct person in the chain of purchasing can bring a racketeering claim. And here, the first person that buys the drug are wholesalers, big companies that then turn around and resell it, right? The reason he was wrong is the Supreme Court has looked at who's the first person injured, right? And the fraud here was directed at the people paying list price. And so we think we were the first person injured. So in the new claim, we got an aha moment that I don't think the judge can get around. The RICO claim is for those who bought mail order from one of the co-conspirators. So if you bought your insulin mail order from Cigna or Express Scripts, you bought directly, and therefore the judge can't throw it out. Bear in mind, there's lots of elements of RICO, and he said we met them all, that there was a conspiracy, that they formed this enterprise, but this one element he said you didn't meet. So now we've met it. So I think we got the judge boxed in. In my view, he's got to let the racketeering claim go forward.
Well, we're not sending this episode to him, so I'm glad you're on our side, Steve.
I want him to know I'm mad and I'm not giving up.
And I'm really glad about that. And I definitely want to come back to that. I'm really glad to hear that. Does the recent legislation, the changes to Medicare pricing, the push at the state level, many states, different states, to change or cap insulin copays, does that affect this at all? I want to tell you about AG1, the daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. it makes me feel like I'm doing something good for my body, right? I'm giving it the nutrition it craves. AG1 is a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food-sourced nutrients. It helps you build your health foundation first. I get the travel packs, so I don't have to miss a day, and it just tastes great. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/Stacy. That's drinkag1.com/STACEY. Check it out.
Well, there's a backward looking and forward looking.
Okay.
So backward looking, it doesn't help the people who pay too much money for whom we're trying to get damages. Going forward, it certainly makes it better. But my understanding is there's still lots of groups of people who pay on list price that aren't going to get help from federal or state legislation.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I certainly, my audience, we talk about this all the time. And there are so many complexities to the coupons that are put out there that make it very difficult if you don't have really good commercial insurance, or now you're not on Medicare to get these things covered.
We would love to hear about that. If people have examples of where they're not benefiting, we'd like to know those examples.
All right, tell me what you're looking for. We'll get you all the people.
Call us up. Tell us you're uninsured and it's not helping you. You're copay and it's not helping you. Here's why. Gathering that kind of information would be helpful to us.
Okay, yeah, we'll get the word out for sure. I mean, my family is an interesting example because we buy our insurance on the marketplace. My husband and I are self-employed. The preferred insulin on our plan was not the insulin that my son used. And a lot of people can go back and forth, but he was a teenager in a really good place at the time. And I don't know if you know the delicate balance of teenagers in type 1. I didn't want to mess anything up. And I fought. And with the access that I have, I called Lily's communications people because, we have contact information. They come on the show. They haven't come on since 2020 because I was rather rude to them at the time. But I was able to find the right people and the right coupons and the right pharmacy. And my doctor did prior authorization. And it was crazy. It took 2.5 weeks to get it all done. I've talked about it in a past episode. And so we were able to not pay $2,000 a month for his insulin, which is what would have happened if I wanted to stay on that. So even somebody like me with all the access, all the knowledge, who winds up paying $35 a month, it's a lot of work. So I'm not saying I'm signing up for your lawsuit. Doesn't sound like I would qualify, but it's just bananas right now.
Right. I agree with you.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you talk about these companies as the judge said, as co-conspirators. We're talking about pretty elevated language, but I guess what I'm asking is, has that been proven or is it something you're trying to prove?
Well, no, I think we haven't got to the stage where the judge rules whether we have enough evidence, but I think it's fairly clear that each drug company, whether it's Lilly, Novo, or Sanofi, conspired with the PBMs to engage in this, we call it the spread between list price and real price, spread marketing kind of program.
It's got to be really disheartening for you all, for your team, right? To go through all this, get rejected with that, having to refile this. I know it's a job, right? I know you don't have diabetes yourself, but why do you keep moving forward with this? This is a really hard case, it sounds like, with a judge who's, we'll see what happens, but has already thrown a bunch of roadblocks at you.
So this is what we do. I mean, my firm is out. We do class actions. We try to pride ourselves on doing justice. And a lot of the cases we take are great causes. And I've been doing this for 35 years. And a lot of times there are bumps, big bumps, and you just got to keep going and not be discouraged. Sure. For a week or two, we were all totally down in the dumps, but then you just pick yourself up and get back on the playing field.
And this might seem to some a distasteful question. And if you don't want to answer it, you could tell me. But how do you all get paid? Is it once the class action lawsuit is settled?
How do we get paid? My partners are asking me that right now. So we don't get paid until we win. And then let's say that we got $10 million, just throw out a random number. And then we have to apply to the court to get our fees approved, because the court then is acting as a fiduciary for the class to make sure we don't charge too much. Typically, we charge between 25 and 30%. We've also spent about, I think, $7 million in out-of-pocket costs, paying experts, getting the data. So we're out a ton of money and time right now, which the prospects might be getting worse that we're going to get repaid. It's a risk we're going to take.
I ask because being I'm not familiar with class action lawsuit. I think some people might have a question of who's paying for this, right?
Right now, no one is but me.
Right. Let's go back to one of the cases that you did win, that cancer case we talked about right at the beginning. What is it like when you do win something like this? And, you're contacting people, and it's not just about, I know for the diabetes community, it wouldn't just be about the money, although that'd be really nice to get some money, but it would be about going forward, right? It's about what would change.
Right. So in the case I mentioned about the cancer drugs, we changed the way that they price those drugs. They don't do that anymore because Congress got involved as well. And then an interesting story, in the middle of that case, we found a document where the publisher of the average wholesale price, it's published by a compendium, was talking to one of the wholesalers, and the wholesalers said, why don't you just raise the spread a little bit on this drug in your book, and we'll make more money. And you know what they did? They raised the spread on almost all brand name drugs just so that the wholesaler could skim, right? So we brought a racketeering case again, and we settled that case for, I think, $350 million. It was on the eve of the recession, so the company didn't have any cash. But they agreed to roll back the average wholesale price on every brand name drug in America, right? And that happened, and that saved the state Medicaid programs billions of dollars every year. So those cases have made real change in America. And you're smiling, and we all smiled when we got that result.
That is great to hear.
We probably uncorked a few bottles of champagne.
All right. Before I let you go, you said people should call you up, let you know, truly, what do you need from us? And I can put your contact information in the show notes. We can share websites.
We'll set up something on our website that people could send information. I'll talk to our PR people about that. And we'll have an intake form that I will develop exactly what we want. And then you could share the location of that with your folks.
That'd be amazing. I would love that. Thank you so much. I think there's this frustration, as even among us who are not paying enormous sums for insulin, that we want to do something. We want to help. I mean, we see this is our community. These are our people.
No, I understand.
Oh, so yeah. And I looked at the clock. I got my son, I got a few more years before he ages off of my insurance, but I don't want his life to be dictated by this. I don't want him picking a job so we can get great insurance for insulin. It's ridiculous. So Steve, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for doing the interview. Of course, thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing. I'd love to talk to you again. And certainly we'll spread the word and we'll get the information out there. Thanks for being here.
And one other thing.
Yeah.
We're interested in drug overpricing problems. So if there are other issues where people feel they're being ripped off, we'd like to hear about those as well. We have a case, very similar case going on against Humira, which is the largest rheumatoid arthritis drug. The prices are crazy high, even higher than this. And folks who have to pay out of pocket are just getting ripped again. Same thing, average wholesale price scheme. And it's going on in other drugs. So people have stories to tell us. We're glad to hear them.
All right. You got it.
Okay. Thanks. Great to meet you.
Thank you so much. I will link up all the information from the attorneys in the show notes. If you go to diabetes-connections.com and then click on the Type 2 show, it will be there. Also, wherever you're listening, if you're listening to a podcast app, they all have like a little, more here, or they say different things on different apps, but there's usually a way to get to the information about every show. If you have any issues, email me, stacy@diabetes-connections.com. You really can make a difference here. And if you've been affected by this, you deserve compensation if and when they win the case. So definitely check that out. I'll also be posting it all over our social media. I am Stacy Sims on Instagram. Everywhere else, I am Diabetes Connections. It's the best way to find me. And of course, I will keep you posted. Steve and I are going to keep emailing if there's any changes or updates of information. I'll bring that to you. Thanks as always to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacy Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacy Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.